In part 6, we're going to bypass using a custom connector and call the API directly that we exposed through APIM. Technically, you not need to use a custom connector like we did in part 5, but it does provide more flexibility. We will be focusing on using an HTTP request from the flow in order to call our API and add a document. Let's jump right into the flow and have a look. Let's take a look at the flow I've created to send the HTTP post request. This approach does not require the use of a custom connector in order to add a document to our CosmosDB Mongo API instance. The caveat here is that it is not as flexible as leveraging a custom connector. So let's take a look at the two actions that are important for this flow. First being the compose action, in which we create a JSON document that we're going to pass to an API. Second, the HTTP post action is where we call our API and pass the document that we want to create. Sure, you can do this without exposing this through APIM, but my personal preference is to expose this through APIM and a custom connector. Let's see this in action now. Okay, in this demo, we're going to demonstrate how we would parse this with the flow using the HTTP request action as compared to using the connector. So we're going to call the API directly instead of going through the connector for this process. So there could be some benefit to this if you don't want to spend the time to create a custom connector. This is a pretty quick and easy way to call the endpoint. So as you can see here, I've got the bad email recipient in the to line here, and I've got the from selected as my shared mailbox. So when we send this email, we're going to get another bad delivery message in the shared shared mailbox folder. This will allow us to trigger the flow so we can take action on those delivery failures. So let me go ahead and send this, and then I'm going to jump right over to CosmosDB. Give me 1 second to switch windows. And we can see we got 2 documents here. So I'm just going to refresh this. We already have the 3rd document. And if you take a look there, you will see that this was sent from the HTTP flow because I changed the title to HTTP post. And we can see that it was an undeliverable email. And this is how I can distinguish between which flows are executing. So if you take a look at this one, this came from the custom connector, and this was a result from the HTTP post flow. So now if I navigate back over to my flows, and we take a look at this run history for this flow here, we will see that this was executed 35 seconds ago. So if we take a look at the flow here, and I want to point out the 2 important pieces here. So we do need to use a compose action here to create the JSON document. And this is just demonstrating that the JSON document has been properly formatted with the proper attributes and properties. And we can see here we call the endpoint using an HTTP request, and in the body we passed along the output from the compose. So the endpoint properly gets what it's expecting, and we get a 201 response from that. So it was successful. And again, if I navigate back over to the CosmosDB database, you can see, in fact, the document is here. So what have we learned today? So the important takeaways are, number 1, we cannot use the CosmosDB connector or the MongoDB connector when using the Mongo API with CosmosDB. You'll need to expose an API that leverages the Mongo client to talk to CosmosDB that's using the Mongo API. We also used APIM so we can quickly generate an open API definition to be used when creating the connector. So when you create the connector, the open API definition is generated from APIM, allows us to do so quickly. There is an alternative to this, and you can use Postman V1 collections for that. You can read the online docs for more information on that. So the other important thing that you need to be aware of is when you create your custom connector, you need to ensure that the Swagger for the custom connector has the proper body schema, and I demonstrated that earlier in the presentation. So I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me. That concludes our final chapter in this 6-part series. I hope it was useful.